Grease smeared across his forearm. Jack Weston tightened the last bolt on the engine and wiped his hands on a rag. The scent of motor oil clung to the air, but it was a welcome change from the suffocating smell of expensive cologne and leather interior he was used to. Here in this small-town auto shop, no one knew who he really was. No flashing cameras, no board meetings, no trust fund socialites chasing his name. Just sweat, hard work, and peace. Or at least, it had been peaceful until she walked in. The door to the shop swung open, and in stepped a woman who looked entirely out of place among the clutter of tools and the scent of gasoline. She had wild, honey-blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail, and her hazel eyes burned with determination. She was wearing denim shorts and a faded t-shirt, but there was something unmistakably elegant about her, even with a smudge of dirt on her cheek. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm but slightly breathless. "I need help. My car broke down a few blocks away and I don't know what's wrong with it." Jack pulled off his gloves and tossed them onto the workbench. "What kind of car?" "A '98 Corolla," she admitted, crossing her arms. Yeah, laugh it up." "I know it's ancient, but it gets me from point A to point B well, usually." He smirked, amused by her defensive tone. "I wasn't gonna laugh, I work on cars, not judge 'em." She exhaled, some of the tension in her shoulders easing. "Good, because I really need it fixed and I can't afford some fancy dealership trying to rip me off." Jack studied her for a second. She wasn't like the women he was used to, those who draped themselves in designer dresses and expected everything handed to them on a silver platter. There was a fire in her, a kind of resilience he respected. "All right," he said, grabbing his toolbox, "show me where it is." By the time they reached her car, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the quiet street. Jack popped the hood and took a quick look. "Your alternator's shot," he said after a moment. "It's not a quick fix, but I can get it done by tomorrow," she groaned. "Tomorrow, I need it for work in the morning." "You got anywhere to be tonight?" She hesitated. "Didn't think so," he smirked. "Come by the shop in the morning, I'll have it ready." She sighed, clearly frustrated but with no other choice. "Fine, thanks. What's your name?" "Jack," he said, offering a hand. She shook it, her grip firm. "I'm Ellie." The next morning, Ellie arrived at the shop just as he was finishing up. She stepped inside, brushing her hair out of her face. "Is it ready?" Jack wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. "All set." "How much do I owe you?" She reached into her bag, already wincing. He tossed the wrench onto the workbench and leaned against it. "I'll cut you a deal, $50. Her eyes widened. "That's it? You're local." "And I like the way you stood up for your car yesterday," he teased. She narrowed her eyes. "You sure you're not scamming me?" Jack chuckled. "I don't need to scam anyone." She studied him for a moment as if seeing him differently now. Then she pulled out a crumpled 50 and handed it over. "Thanks, Jack. Really." Before he could say anything else, she was gone, leaving behind nothing but the scent of vanilla and a strange feeling in his chest. He had come here to escape, to disappear. He never expected someone like Ellie to make him feel seen. Jack hadn't expected to see Ellie again so soon. But 3 days after fixing her car, she was back, this time standing in the doorway of the shop, hands on her hips, eyes flashing with frustration. Jack straightened from under the hood of a Mustang, wiping his hands on a rag before arching a brow at her. "Ellie, you rigged my car," she accused, storming inside. That caught him off guard. "Excuse me?" She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose. "I was driving to work and it died. Again, same issue." "Either you scammed me or you did a terrible job." Jack crossed his arms, amusement flickering in his gaze. "I don't scam people and I don't do terrible work." "Did you check the battery connections?" She faltered for half a second. "The what?" he sighed, setting the rag down. "Let me guess you didn't check anything, just assumed I was the problem." Ellie's lips pressed into a thin line. Maybe, Jack shook his head, suppressing a smile. Pop the hood. Let's see what's going on. Out in the lot, he leaned over the engine while Ellie hovered beside him, arms crossed. Within moments, he spotted the issue: a corroded battery terminal that had likely been loose for months. This, he gestured, is the real problem, not me. Ellie peeked over his shoulder. So? Not your fault. Nope, she exhaled, shoulders sagging. Okay, fine, I might have jumped to conclusions. Little bit, she groaned. I'll make it up to you, coffee. As an apology for accusing you of being a fraud. Jack glanced at her, surprised. He hadn't expected an apology, let alone an invitation. All right, he said. I'll take coffee. They ended up at a small cafe down the street, tucked into a corner booth by the window. Ellie stirred her drink absent-mindedly before looking up. So what's your story? Jack sipped his black coffee. What do you mean? You just don't seem like the typical mechanic. He kept his expression neutral. And what does that mean? She shrugged. I don't know, you don't talk like one or act like one, and you definitely don't look like one. Jack smirked. Are you stereotyping mechanics? No, just you. He chuckled but didn't answer, instead taking another sip. He wasn't ready to tell her who he really was. Not yet. Ellie tapped her fingers against the table. All right, mystery man, keep your secrets, but I'll figure you out eventually. Something about the way she said it sent a strange warmth through him. He wasn't used to people wanting to know him, the real him. But Ellie, she was determined. And for the first time in a long while, Jack wasn't sure if he wanted to run from that. Jack didn't know how it happened, but Ellie had become a part of his life before he even had time to question it. She showed up at the shop more often now, sometimes claiming she needed an oil change, other times just appearing with 2 cups of coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. He didn't stop her. Couldn't. She was different from anyone he'd ever met. She didn't care about status, money, or appearances. She didn't pry into his past, didn't ask why he never talked about where he came from. Instead, she told him about her own life, her struggles, her dreams, her frustrations about working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. And somehow, without meaning to, Jack found himself wanting to tell her everything, but he couldn't. Not yet. One evening after the shop had closed, Ellie convinced him to go for a drive. She said she wanted to show him something. He didn't question it, just got into her old Corolla and let her take the lead. They drove out of town, the streets giving way to open fields and winding roads. The sky had turned a soft shade of violet, the last traces of daylight fading beyond the horizon. Eventually, she pulled off onto a narrow dirt road, stopping near a run-down barn. Jack glanced at her. You bring all your mechanics to abandoned barns, Ellie laughed, unbuckling her seatbelt. Just the ones who agree to free coffee. He followed her out, hands in his pockets as she led him inside. The barn smelled of dust and aged wood, the air thick with the scent of hay. In the center, beneath a massive hole in the roof, the stars stretched endlessly above them. Ellie turned to him, her eyes glowing in the dim light. I used to come here as a kid. My dad would bring me when I was upset about something. He said looking at the stars made problems feel smaller. Jack tilted his head back, taking in the sky. He wasn't sure if it made his problems feel smaller, but for the first time in a long time they felt distant. Ellie sat on the ground, leaning back on her elbows. So tell me something real, Jack. He hesitated, then sat beside her. Like what? Something you don't tell most people, Jack exhaled. He could lie, keep up the act. But the way Ellie looked at him, like she actually wanted to know him, not the version he pretended to be, made it impossible. I don't belong here, he admitted. Not in this town. Not in that shop. Ellie didn't react the way most people would. She just nodded, waiting. Jack ran a hand through his hair. I left behind a lot of things I wasn't proud of. I wanted a fresh start. She watched him carefully. And did you get it? Jack looked at her, the weight of the truth pressing against his chest. I don't know. Ellie didn't push. She just leaned back, eyes on the sky. Sometimes running isn't about escaping, it's about finding where you're supposed to be. Jack didn't respond. Because for the first time he wasn't sure if he was running away or running toward something. And that terrified him. Jack had never been afraid of risk. He had built his life on calculated moves, on knowing when to step forward and when to step back. But sitting across from Ellie in the warm glow of her tiny kitchen, he realized for the first time that he was terrified. She was slicing strawberries for some late-night dessert she had insisted on making, her hair tied up in a messy knot, her face relaxed as she hummed softly under her breath. He should have told her the truth by now. Every second that passed made it worse, made the weight of his secret feel heavier. Ellie glanced up, catching his stare. You look like a man about to say something big. Jack exhaled slowly, setting his fork down. I might be. She raised an eyebrow, but there was no suspicion in her expression, just curiosity, that same quiet patience she always had when she was waiting for him to figure himself out. Jack leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Ellie, there's something I haven't told you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. She set the knife down, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Okay. He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. The truth had never felt this difficult before. I'm not just a mechanic. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Yeah, I figured, Jack blinked. You did, Ellie shrugged. You don't talk like someone who's spent his whole life under a hood, and you definitely don't act like someone who's struggling to make ends meet. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't realize I was that obvious. You weren't, she admitted, but I pay attention. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his heart pounding. Ellie, I come from money, a lot of it. My family runs Weston Industries. For the first time, she looked genuinely surprised. Weston Industries? As in the multi-billion-dollar corporation, he nodded, and I was supposed to take over. But I didn't want that life. I didn't want the cameras, the boardrooms, the expectations. So I left, came here. Tried to be something else. Ellie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. So, what are you saying? That this, she gestured between them, was just part of some escape plan. Jack's stomach twisted. No. Ellie, you're the only real thing I've found in all of this. She held his gaze, searching his face. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd think I was lying to you about who I am. Ellie shook her head, standing up and pacing to the other side of the kitchen. She grabbed onto the counter, her knuckles turning white. You weren't lying about who you are, Jack. You were lying about where you came from. He stood too, crossing the room to her. I know. And I hate that. I hate that I let this go so long without telling you. She turned to face him, her hazel eyes filled with emotions he couldn't quite read. So, what now? Do you go back to that life? Jack didn't hesitate. I don't want that life. I want this. I want you. Ellie stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. I need a minute, he nodded, stepping back. Take all the time you need. She looked at him once more before turning and walking out the back door, disappearing into the night. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had risked everything tonight. Now all he could do was wait. Jack didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the dim glow of Ellie's kitchen, staring at the half-eaten dessert on the table, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. His whole life, he had been in control of his choices, his image, his future. But now, everything depended on Ellie, on whether she could forgive the lie and see him for who he really was. By the time the first rays of dawn filtered through the window, he knew he couldn't stay in limbo. He needed to find her. Jack stepped outside into the crisp morning air, his breath visible in the coolness of it. He had no idea where she had gone last night, but he knew her well enough by now to take a guess. He drove, past the town square, past the quiet streets just waking up until he reached the old barn. The place where she'd told him looking at the stars made problems feel smaller. And there she was. Ellie sat on the wooden steps outside the barn, arms loosely wrapped around her knees, her face turned toward the horizon. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. Jack parked and got out, his boots crunching over gravel as he approached. She didn't turn to look at him, but she knew he was there. "I figured you'd come here," he said quietly, stopping a few feet away. Ellie let out a slow breath, her gaze still fixed on the distant fields. "Yeah." "I needed space to think." Jack hesitated, searching for the right words. "And did you?" She finally looked at him, her hazel eyes unreadable. "I don't know, Jack. You dropped a lot on me last night." "I know," he admitted, stepping closer. "And I'm sorry for not telling you sooner." "I should have." Ellie studied him for a long moment, then shook her head slightly. "It's not just that you didn't tell me, it's that you came here pretending to be someone else." "I keep wondering, was any of it real?" Jack crouched in front of her, leveling their gazes. "Ellie, everything was real. Every moment, every conversation, every time you walked into that shop and made my day better without even knowing it. You're the only real thing I've had in a long time." She swallowed hard. "I don't know how to process this, Jack. It's not just that you're wealthy, it's that you're someone else entirely, and that life of yours. It's a world I don't understand." Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I left that world because I didn't want it. I still don't. The only thing I want is you." Ellie dropped her gaze, her fingers tightening around her knee. "And what if your past catches up with you? What if one day you wake up and realize you miss it?" Jack shook his head firmly. "I won't, because I've never wanted anything the way I want this. The way I want us." Silence stretched between them, thick with uncertainty. Jack's heart pounded as he waited, as he let her process everything in her own time. Finally, Ellie sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know how to trust this yet, Jack. But I do know one thing: I don't want to walk away." Relief crashed through him so forcefully he almost staggered. "Then don't," he said, voice rough. "We'll figure this out together. No lies, no secrets, just us." Ellie met his gaze, something softening in her expression. "Okay, but promise me one thing." "Anything?" She took a deep breath. "Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll always be honest with me." Jack reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "I swear it, Ellie." And for the first time in his life, Jack Weston knew exactly where he belonged. Jack didn't let go of Ellie's hand as they walked back to the car. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. There was still uncertainty in the way her fingers curled around his, but she wasn't pulling away. That gave him hope. The drive back to town was quiet, but it wasn't an uneasy silence. It was contemplative, filled with the weight of everything unspoken between them. Ellie sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, lost in thought. Jack didn't push. He'd laid everything bare, and now it was her turn to decide what to do with it. When they reached her small house, she hesitated before opening the door. The early morning light cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the emotions flickering across her features. "Do you want to come in?" she asked finally, her voice quieter than usual. Jack studied her for a moment before nodding. "Yeah." Inside, the air was warm and familiar, carrying traces of vanilla and coffee. Jack had been here before, but this time, everything felt different. The weight of his truth lingered between them, reshaping the foundation of whatever they had built. Ellie moved to the kitchen, reaching for the coffee pot. Her movements were slower than usual, as if she was still processing everything. Jack leaned against the counter, watching her. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said after a moment. "I just need to know if you're willing to try." Ellie poured 2 mugs of coffee, sliding one toward him. I don't know how to fit into your world, Jack, and I don't know if you really want to stay in mine. Jack took the cup but didn't drink. I don't care about my old world. I walked away from it for a reason. She finally met his gaze, but it's still a part of you, he exhaled, setting the cup down. Maybe. But it's not the part that matters to me anymore. Ellie studied him, searching his face for something. Then, after what felt like forever, she let out a slow breath. Okay, Jack's chest tightened. Okay, she nodded. I don't want to walk away either, but I need time to figure out how this works, how we work. Relief crashed through him like a tidal wave. He reached for her hand again, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. We'll figure it out together. For the first time since last night, Ellie smiled. It was small, hesitant, but it was real. And Jack knew no matter what came next, he wasn't going anywhere. In the weeks that followed, Jack and Ellie found a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments of doubt, but they were navigating it together. Jack stayed at the shop, continuing to work on cars, proving to Ellie that he wasn't just passing through. One evening, after closing up, Jack found Ellie waiting outside, leaning against her car. The setting sun cast golden streaks across her hair, making her look almost ethereal. I have something for you, she said, her expression unreadable. Jack raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Ellie smirked. Just get in the car. He didn't argue, he trusted her. They drove out past the town limits, down winding roads that had become familiar. When she finally pulled up to a secluded stretch of land, Jack frowned. What is this place? Ellie shut off the engine and turned to him. I put in an offer on it today. Jack's eyes widened. You bought land, she nodded, her expression a mix of excitement and nervousness. I always wanted to open my own repair shop, not just some chain place, but a real, honest business. A place for people who can't afford to get ripped off by dealerships, and now, I'm making it happen. Jack stared at her, pride swelling in his chest. Ellie, that's incredible, she shrugged, but he could see the way her fingers tightened on her lap. I don't know if it'll work, but I had to try. Jack reached over, cupping her face gently. It'll work because you don't give up. She leaned into his touch, exhaling softly. I was hoping you'd want to be a part of it. Jack's heart stilled. You mean with you? Ellie nodded. You love working on cars, and you're damn good at it. I don't care where you came from, Jack. I care about who you are now. Jack didn't even hesitate. I'm in. Ellie let out a breathless laugh. Just like that, he grinned. Just like that. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a tight embrace. Jack held her close, breathing her in, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running. He was home. Months later, the shop opened. It wasn't flashy or polished, but it was theirs. Jack and Ellie worked side by side, building something real, something lasting. And one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack took Ellie's grease-stained hands in his own and kissed her like he never wanted to stop. Because he didn't, and he never would.